How would you compare the state of Halo now back to when it was its original trilogy?
That's a good question.
That's how I would just laugh at it. Yeah.
R.I.P.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, look, I've had fun with Infinite, the newest game. Like I still go on and play it sometimes. Like it's a fine game. It's a fine piece of software. But they're unless what's the 343, right? That's the company. Unless they're able to actually like innovate on Halo and not just copy and paste, it's never going to reach the heights that it was in the original trilogy, because Halo was fucking everywhere, man. I remember like people who didn't even know what video games were knew that Halo 3 was coming out. it was that big a deal. So it's not comparable.
I could be sort of wrong on this, but I remember when Halo 1 through 3 were big. At least in my circle, nobody cared about the story. Like, the story was completely irrelevant. I mean, it was kind of like, oh, you get to play as the other guy? Well, that's kind of cool. Yeah. And then I remember somewhere around 4 was when I first heard people being like, let's really care about Cortana. And let's really, like, look at all these cool different creatures that are in this game now, and all these cool, like, people. And back then, it wasn't about the story. At least, again, to me and my friends, we were just love playing multiplayer shooters. Somehow, I think maybe with Bungie's exit or something, they really wanted you to care about the story. And I just never really followed that. So that's kind of the way I see it. Obviously, it was better back in the day, clearly.
You know what I think that was? I think that was Bungie, because Bungie did the original trilogy, and then they did like ODST and Reach.
Yeah.
And those did have story. Like ODST had the ODST team, and then Reach had like Noble 6 and stuff. And those did have stories that people like did kind of latch onto a little bit. And I think that's where 343 came from. I think they were like, okay, well they liked Reach and its cast of like different Spartans. So let's do stories. But like the problem is that you're putting Master Chief into a story.
Right.
You know,
you're putting a guy who's meant to be quiet and like only wants to kill things.
Yeah,
that's what the player wants to do.
If you ever, because like you can look, like there's like developer commentary for the first 3 Halo games, and like Halo 2 and stuff, if you look back at like the story and stuff, they'll completely just be like, oh yeah, this was changed, like we just completely changed the story and what was happening in this area. Bungie didn't really care that much about the story.
The story in the original trilogy was like a fun little thing to go through. That was an excuse for you to play a campaign together on the couch. And even just going through legendary mode or putting those dumb skulls on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, some of it was like kind of like it started. I think once you get into 3, it starts to get a little more emotional with like Cortana being corrupted or something. But all in all, it was just a fun excuse to shoot aliens in space.
Right.
And I really enjoyed that. And besides which, even if you weren't, the co-op was not your bag, playing online was just amazing. Halo back in the day was legendary. It was like state of the art. As time has gone on, it's really not that novel anymore. You know, online shooter games are a dime a dozen. And what have they done with the formula to really change it? Add jetpacks? That's what they did in, I think it was Reach. And it's like, okay, like, ironically enough, a bit of a reach. You know, like that's not really like changing the Halo concept that much for me. So I've never gotten back into Halo after the original trilogy. I've never cared. It's just impact-wise, it's just not the same as it was back then. Does it mean you can't enjoy it the same way now? You probably can. Similarly enough anyway, but no, back then it was chef's kiss.
Well, I find it ironic because it was so, when you played Halo 2, like there was no game like it. Like that was Halo 2 and that was different than the other first person shooters that existed. for whatever reason, and this might be 343 Studios or Microsoft urging them, or I don't really know, but they homogenized Halo to now have aim down sights, to now have sprinting where you lower your gun.
It's Call of Duty. Yeah, it's Call of
Right.
Duty.
I booted it up just so I could have a talking point in you know what we're talking about this month. I booted up Halo Infinite just to give it a couple runs. I'm like, why does this game feel like Call of Duty now? Like, I don't want to play Call of Duty. I want to play freaking Halo. Like, they used to be so different, and that could have been their selling point, is we still have Halo. They don't really have Halo anymore. They just have the world, but again, who gives a shit about the world? I want to shoot shit in Halo's engine.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that and I'm at a point to where I've been playing through all the Halo games, and I just beat Reach, so I'm about to cross over from Reach into 4. But the thing is that even up to Reach, like the core combat and gameplay of those games are still really good. Like they still feel really fantastic, and like that's the excuse to play the campaigns in the earlier Halos, because the gameplay is just fucking good, you know. And then it seems like 343 wanted to expand the world, but they didn't do anything with the gameplay. So like the gameplay just doesn't even feel as good. It's like when your game doesn't feel as good as Halo 1 or 2, and you're like Halo 5, like come on, guys, you know, like something's wrong. Something's really wrong. So,
I agree.
yeah, not comparable.
Hey y'all, don't forget to subscribe to them button mappers.